Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Marks Paneth LLP, Capital One Bank, Collins Building Services, Meridian Capital Group. Additional support has been provided by grants from AKA Hotel Residences Corman Communities, Ariel Property Advisors, Amarant Bank, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, Chase Commercial Mortgage Lending, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Casamatides Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, Matone Group, New Banks, Newmark Knight Frank, Ocean First Bank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Services, Stonehenge NYC, SVN CPEX Real Estate Services, Tierra CRG, the Meringer Family Foundation, and these friends. Everybody likes industrial property. For years, it was the stepchild. Oh, industrial, why you want to get involved with that? You can't rent it, you can't do anything. But the e-commerce came, the world has changed. So the world is different, and industrial is a property, an asset class that people love from all over the world. It doesn't matter. So today I've assembled this group of individuals who really are the gurus who understand what's happening in the industrial market in the region. My guests include Andrea Himmel, who is the Director of Strategic Investments at Himmel Meringorf Properties. The legendary Kalman Dolgen, who is the co-president of Kalman Dolgen Affiliates. John Ritter, who is Executive Vice President and Principal at Solomon Zuckerbrot. And last but not least, Dan Mark, who I never knew came from Boulder, Colorado, over here, who is a partner at Terra CRG. So, why do you like industrial? I mean, why industrial?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I've been watching actually for over a decade. Really enjoy it. So industrial is definitely a flavor of the month. I would agree with that. But we've been around for 40 years, and we've owned industrial in Queens, for example, since the 1980s. And we're in industrial right now for the long haul. We like it. We just closed a property in the Bronx last May. And we like the supply-demand imbalance. We were talking about this earlier on. We think that the dynamics that have led to industrial being a good asset class are really leaning toward it being a good investment in the long term. So in 2003, the Bloomberg administration rezoned 200 blocks of industrial to become rezoned for other asset classes, mostly residential. And at the same time, you've got retailers trying to change their supply chains to become closer to the end user, who in the New York area tends to be on average much wealthier than the average throughout the country. So retailers want to be delivering to those of us in this tri-state area. Furthermore, we actually like the non-e-commerce tenant type. For example, 11% of retail sales today are only e-commerce. So we still want to cater to the 89% of the supply chain users that are not e-commerce, for example.
I mean, right now I have literally 3 investors who've been involved with Cal, you've been involved with industrial for how many years? I mean, before you even, right?
Before, in December, we will have a fourth generation that's been 116 years.
So you've been involved with industrial for 116 years.
Correct.
Okay, John, I mean, Shalom Zerka brought us around for close to 50
Since
years.
62.
Right.
But I've only been there since 78.
Okay. But you've been involved with it for industrial.
From the beginning.
I mean, as an owner over there.
Yeah.
Okay. What have we seen with regard to the changes in industrial? You know, what Andrea had basically said before, quietly, you know, not every part of industrial is industrial. And I know you've sold a number of properties. Let's talk about that.
I think you start with defining what is industrial, right? Is industrial manufacturing? Is it distribution? Is it last mile? Is it logistics? So right now, you know, if we're talking about flavors of the month, like Andrea said, you know, logistics is really driving a lot of the demand right now. I don't have the amount of time in the market as some of my colleagues here do, but I can tell you in just the relatively short period of time I've been working the industrial market in Brooklyn, since we only focus in Brooklyn. It started, this is about 8 years ago. It was industrial when I got here, and then it started to turn into conversions when we sold a building. It was a Golden Marine building in Red Hook. It's now home to Tesla and a number of offices. The conversion was starting to happen. 2017, Cytex bought the large assemblage in Red Hook from the Italian company Estate 4. Nobody in the Brooklyn market had heard of Cytex before. Now everyone knows who they are. They're an industrial investment company. They ended up getting UPS there. UPS then bought it from them for 3 times what they paid for it, from $100 to $300 million. And all of a sudden, in 2017, I think the market woke up and realized.
But you know, I think you brought up an interesting comment. When people sometimes think of industrial, they think of industrial to be used for storage, okay? Or e-commerce is another idea. But one of the industrial things which made New York City the way it was, going back to the Bush Terminal, going to Industry City, going to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, was manufacturing.
When I first came in, we'd go to any of our buildings in Bushwick or Williamsburg or Greenpoint or East New York or any of those, and I could see a potpourri of every product that was made. We had sewers, double knitters, baby bunting, woodworkers, shoe lasts. My father, God bless him, we had a tenant that left a bunch of, I mean, hundreds, 1,000 of the shoe lasts. My father became a new hobbyist. He took them home and he created bookends and gavels and putters out of these things. But you could go in to a potpourri of buildings and never have to go to a store. That's we have lost the manufacturing.
You have one building that makes Amy's. Now, with regard to what has happened in New York City, at one time we had a garment center with industrial. You don't have a garment center sewing that much in industrial. Under the new zoning that's changed, so they have to go somewhere else. Let's look at the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Well, the manufacturing in New York has dramatically changed. It's moved to China. And manufacturing is a different type of industry. The movie industry is manufacturing. You put a lot of people together, you create a product.
I mean, your office is in the Kaufman
Right.
studio, so, you know, it's...
And the support industries surrounding entertainment industries require a lot of space. I know the TV and movie people like to put all the money on the screen, but you have the props, the sets, the designers.
And you
all
need
the
I mean, but here's the question. When you're talking about the movie industry and when you're talking about the industry, where are these people putting their trucks? I mean, that's the biggest problem. We're landlocked, okay? We're not building Battery Park City anymore, that we have sand that we can build on the water over there.
If you look at what people are willing to pay for parking, those rents have gone up a lot too.
We just had a tenant of ours on a building on Sutton in Brooklyn, and they put in a lot of money into an art display, art studios, and an event center, and they had to go out, and I think they've recently purchased a building of about 20,000 square feet, and they paid top dollar a couple of blocks from there just to have parking for now.
Let's talk about what happened years ago with the Swing Line building, what you did on that.
Well, it was a traditional manufacturing building, and we broke it up into smaller units. Swing Line had the entire building. We broke it up into a number of smaller units, and we continue to have industrial companies. But I think we have just about the last printer in New York in that building, and he's
What's your thoughts about with regard to the industrial conversion to office today? Are we seeing a lot of people still bullish on that, or is that
No.
seen out of favor these days?
It's somewhat out of favor. I mean, I can speak to the Brooklyn market. There's a lot of office inventory that has come online that still needs to be leased. There's some product that's still being built that's going to be coming online. I think people have really cooled off on taking industrial buildings and trying to figure out how to convert them for alternate uses. Bigger buildings are being sought after by big institutional type investors, big family offices. Smaller buildings, though, we just sold one yesterday over on Green Street, 15,000 square feet. It's a drywalling company. So there are plenty of owner users, small manufacturing type businesses, service businesses that still very much are in demand for smaller
I mean, I'll
buildings.
give you a good example, and then we'll go with the Cal. A number of years ago, I recommended my friend who was in the window repair business.
Yes, Mr. Crobot.
Crobot,
Yep.
Kilroy Architectural Windows. Basically, he didn't need this building. Sold the building, I think it was
283
used,
Green.
right, 283 Green, to an individual who was building some residential over there,
Correct.
because the rezoning over there, and he moved up to the Bronx, and he's overjoyed with the property, and he made the money on the property.
We've still found that industrial buildings being converted have been very successful. We are, in fact, doing one of our own buildings now. A woodworker's lease was up, and we are putting a microbrewery into the ground floor for 10,000, 12,000 square feet.
But that's a different type of use, okay? Now you're talking about taking the industrial and making it some retail, okay?
Well, no, the upper
They-
floor, but the upper floors are going to be done as alternate uses.
I mean,
The difference
I
is
can-
the basis that Cal has on his property affords
Right.
him the luxury.
but I think
to do that.
related
Yes.
to what Cal said,
Right.
there was in the wine country of near Riverhead, there was a plumbing supply company who had a 45 or 50,000 square foot one-story industrial. They made that into a cider plant and a meeting
Yeah.
place and a venue place. You were saying, Andrea?
I was going to say, in 2017, we bought a 125,000 square foot building in Long Island City that is 6 stories, and we had the view that we could make it from a flex industrial property to a TAMI building, and invested some capital in it. We paid $190 a foot for it, and had a grand view for TAMI, and there is no TAMI market in Long Island City, is what we discovered. It had a guitar maker, some storage tenants, and we've done great in leasing it. We still have a little space to lease if anyone is interested, but
We have a couple of brokers.
I know, this is great. We're still commanding the rents that the market is quoting itself at, but it's not a TAMI market. It's more of a flex, storage sort of market.
Well, another aspect of that is when it comes to the industrial, breaking into smaller industrial units derives as much rent as some of these TAMI
Totally.
users.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, and it's a lot less cost to convert it with the air conditioning and the walls and drop ceiling. For industrial, all you have to do is some walls, and you can have common bathroom for the same numbers. The profit level is much higher, and it certainly solves the industrial market. But nothing is going to solve the loss of industrial space in the boroughs. We've lost over 20% of our industrial space in the last 20 years, and that's driving rents up. It would be great if you could develop new buildings with manufacturing, light manufacturing on the ground floor and residential above.
Do you see potentially a rezoning with a mixed use?
I would love it. I don't see that on the horizon.
I don't think so. In our conversation with city planning, it's hard to blend those uses. Families walking around with strollers with trucks going in and out of buildings is a very hard thing to plan around. They're trying to do a rezoning, or they're discussing doing a rezoning in North Brooklyn right now, from Greenpoint basically down to Bushwick, but keeping it commercial, but allowing higher density building, less or no parking requirements, which should be able to help people add some
I
more
think
square
the
footage.
parking requirement is a difficult endeavor which has an effect on the industrial world.
Sure.
it's extremely prohibitive to develop new square footage because of the parking requirement.
Andrea, let's talk about the property that you bought in Parkchester recently.
Sure. So last May, we closed the $90 million purchase of a 7.5 acre site in Parkchester. It has a 300,000 square foot building on it, of which 200,000 is warehouse. The remainder is office on the second floor with a little retail. And we were really excited about it because it's got great bones. Great loading dock ratio. It's got 40 loading docks, great ceiling heights, column spacing. We did a lot of research on the industrial market before we went into this. We did a white paper and we said, what is attractive to the end user? You know, they care a lot about egress and ingress, 53-foot trailers. They care a lot about how they get from the highway to the loading dock. And so we did traffic studies, for example. And we studied the end user, the market, how they get there from the port. And then the vans, the parking. So it has 200 parking spots. We liked that it had in-place rents of $6 a foot. So it's a very basic sort of mark-to-market story. It was an off-market deal. It took a long time to close because we had to get CMBS servicer approval. Big equity check, which played to our strengths because we had a lot of cash and we went in with a great partner. So
How interested were lenders to finance this type of property?
So we had to assume an in-place CMBS loan that was quite small because there wasn't that much income in place. We went in with a low cap rate, and we assumed a small CMBS loan that the seller had actually just issued.
Would you build a new industrial property?
If I had a user, it adhered to location, location, location. Yeah, but it would have to be under those circumstances.
We negotiated a deal, didn't get made, for a large chain of movie, TV production organization. And they needed a specialized building. They needed 45-foot ceiling heights, 120-foot depth, parking, air conditioning, soundproofing. And they're willing to pay $45 a square foot.
What was the TI though for that?
I don't know because
Yeah.
it was, but it makes sense because they had the credit and the risk level is low. Also building for a FedEx or a UPS or an Amazon, it makes a lot of sense. They need 30-foot ceiling height.
Yeah.
Netflix is a good example, right? So on Johnson Avenue.
On Johnson Avenue.
Up
Yeah,
in East
the
Williamsburg or
Streetos
Bushwick.
are doing.
Yeah,
Great deal.
it's a building that basically needs to be knocked down, and they're going to build to suit for.
Right, they're buying the land.
They're buying.
$65 a foot
Right.
in rent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have a good tenant, they have a lease over there, okay, and this is going to make the difference.
Right, but everybody else is looking. If the building has a good land component, it is the most in-demand asset class right now.
We were talking before in the green room with regard to some of the people who are planning to build today multi-level. How difficult do you think it is to build multi-level industrial today? Because, especially like Andrea was saying, the 53-foot trucks and, the weight of these trucks with merchandise in them makes it really difficult.
Yeah, I can tell you this just from a marketability standpoint. You need at least 4 acres in order to be able to design and mass the building and the ramps to be able to at least make it work. You guys can talk about the actually ability to make it work.
The other part of it is if they want 30-foot ceiling heights, which is required
Yeah.
for the computerized delivery systems, and you need an M3 zone because that allows a 60-foot ceiling height. So there's very few properties on the market that can be derived with 4 acres that make sense for that.
I think there was a study a year or two ago because they were using a building that they had built out in one of the Midwestern states and trying to superimpose that over here, and they had a hell of a time trying to find a location that would even accommodate it, and then the costs just didn't make any sense to it.
But here's a point of view. We're talking about location and availability. There is space available today in Coney Island.
Yes.
There is space available in East New York. There is space near Aqueduct Racetrack. East New York is in your marketplace over there where you specialize. You know these.
Yeah.
But there, your access to the Belt Parkway over there the interborough?
No trucks on the Belt Parkway. No, it's difficult. Those are far away, and if one wants to deliver to Manhattan, it's too far. If one is going to deliver to Central Brooklyn, it makes sense. It could work.
And Amazon, I believe, was building a industrial facility in Staten Island. There's space over there in Staten Island. The Verrazano you can get on the bridge, but the biggest question is the time component of getting from Staten Island to anywhere,
Cost.
maybe, and the cost element over there.
You also have a lot of environmental issues in Staten Island.
A lot. Yeah,
But they built I've forgotten the name of the developer, but built a beautiful facility, 30-foot ceiling height. It's three-quarters of a million square feet, tons of docks. It's more like a regional distribution center, but the last mile delivery companies that I've dealt with and talked to, they want to be able to make 5 or 6 trips from the warehouse to the actual point of delivery of the buyer in a day. If you have to come from Staten Island or New Jersey, the cost of tolls is unimportant. The cost of going back and forth is the real.
You know, it's interesting. I did a show a couple of months ago, and I had 2 supermarket owners, and basically they were saying that the cost of operation on the food costs increases because every time they're there, they get a traffic ticket. No,
It's significant.
It's significant. The truck gets a traffic ticket because they're unloading, and you can't. You know, the question is, you know, are you going to do unloading at a certain hour of the day? And then you take today with Amazon Prime and Amazon 1 hour service. I mean, how do you get it from one place to the other? I mean, the old Orbach's building is a warehouse today in reality. It's not the most opportune, but it's a place.
It's a great point. I mean, Amazon, I think, spends almost $40 billion a year on shipping. That's its annual expense, and another $40 billion on fulfillment costs. It loses money net on shipping. So it's definitely a major cost that they think about and that they're trying to reduce by getting closer to the end user. And they're just one example. Real estate, as we all talk about, is a small percent of costs relative to the logistics costs of a company in terms of its relative to supply chain. So that's why everyone says, let's just raise the real estate cost relative to the
But
transportation
you know, you can only
cost.
pass on a certain price to the consumer, and to, you know, there's a level that you reach. It's the same idea in the investment sales. You know, somebody may say they want this type of price, but it doesn't. The numbers don't work, as you were trying to say years ago when you sat with your father on a pricing. People have to look at the numbers. Certain people who are taking industrial space and then converting it to office space and thought that they're going to be able to get $40 to $45 a foot have had the awakening that this isn't happening today. And that's what's really going to happen. And I see perhaps a conversion the opposite way. I see the conversion taking the space which was converted to office, going back to industrial, because that's the best use over there. Have you seen that?
Not yet. I think people who have done conversions are still holding out some hope that they're going to be able to attract some tenants. I think if they reprogram those buildings to much smaller office uses, I think they can be a little bit more successful.
I mean, you know, I'll give you a good example. You know, before Costco opened in in Manhattan, people would go to the Costco in Long Island City, which was the old warehouse, industrial warehouse. So, you know, at that time, Costco could afford to take a space where the parking. Today, that is prime property. That property, and I believe it may be under the rezoning that you could do some other type of purpose. You don't have to have retail. So people have to look at it in different ways.
Well, Metropolitan Mall is one property in which it was furniture companies. They had major outlet at Levitt's and some others, and they were offering it out for industrial use. I've heard that they're close to deals on that for three-quarters of a million square feet for industrial use. So that's.
I think you just have to be a little sensitive when you call office as potentially able to be converted to industrial. You have to be sensitive to the idiosyncrasies of what office looks like relative to what industrial users need. So for example, you know, we were looking in Sunset Park at some properties, and we thought, oh, well, this must be competitive with the Brooklyn Navy Terminal, so there's an oversupply. But Brooklyn Navy Terminal columns are extremely close together. The ceilings are very low. That's office space, even on the ground floor, because you can't fit any warehousing type tenant in there because they need better loading, more wide column spacing, and higher ceilings. So that's not really ever going to be industrial product.
Right.
When we talk about industrial, though, and you're talking about warehousing, I'm still thinking of an industrial as manufacturing, which I think is basically not happening here right now.
You know, I did a show on the Navy Yard and I did a show on Industry City. People like the synergy made in New York. Items which are made in New York, food items, clothing items, other products are really getting a great pitch today.
Well, that's why I was about to say that some of the small divisions going to the Bush Terminal and to Navy Yard and some, where they have the smaller IT firms, they have small furniture shops, small clothing shops. That's starting to be a very prominent.
It's a very prominent thing.
Industry now.
So as I always look in my crystal apple to see if it's bright, it's very bright. It's very shiny, especially for the industrial, in all aspects of industrial. We don't have enough industrial for manufacturing. Right now, we don't have enough industrial for e-commerce, and the picture's over there. But our biggest problem is we don't have land to build more industrial. But I'd like to thank Andrea, Cal, John, and Dan, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.